To the front pages as usual. Theresa May's lost her social mobility czar and indeed the entire team, including Gillian Shepherd, a former education secretary in the Conservative governments. She does this funny thing with her face, Theresa May. She has a kind of really wry, rueful mouth thing that she does on these occasions, and the front pages love it. There she is, front page of the Observer, and there she is again doing her rueful look on the front page of the Sunday Times. May betrays families that voted for Brexit is their take on that story. Moving swiftly on, the Sunday Telegraph. He's picking up on the other big story of the day, which is these new red lines and a sense on the right of the Conservative Party that Theresa May has to push back much, much harder against the European Commission. Tories at war over European judges. I sometimes think any headline which has Tories at war and Europe in the headline isn't really a headline, it's just daily life. And then a different story here, a touch of nostalgia. Here is a scandal across the front page of the Mail on Sunday, but it's about a Labour peer and it's about money, how times have changed. Then finally, I'm picking up on all the Meghan stories. The Sunday Express says that Meghan is going to give the economy a £500 million boost because of the wedding. They've got wonderful Debbie from Strictly, we all love her, on the front page. And I think my favourite Meghan story, they're getting odder and odder. Meghan Markle kicked my shin, says the Sunday People. Finally, a rather sad story at the front of the Sunday Mirror. British racing dogs, of course, they're not wanted after they've finished their racing careers, are being sold for meat in China. A horrific story, if true, but let's hope it's not. Let's turn indeed to the papers instead. And can I start with you, Aisha, and the social mobility story? Some people might say not much to see here. After all, Alan Milburn's a Labour politician and he was coming to the end of his time and so forth. Is this a real story?
This is a very real and very damaging story for Theresa May. We've all remembered, you know, the words on the steps of Downing Street about how she wanted to put social justice at the heart of her premiership. And any political party, whatever hue, should have social mobility at its heart. At a very basic level, this is you wanting your children to get on in life. This is wanting to make sure that people have a fair crack of the whip. And Britain is still a very unequal society. Your life chances are actually set by the time you're about 2.5, so deep is quite a lot of the inequality. And I think what's interesting about what Alan Milburn has said is that he says that the government does not have the necessary bandwidth to deal with these issues because of Brexit. Brexit has paralysed this country, and there are huge issues in terms of, you know, if you're looking at, you know, social mobility, you've got to be looking at living standards, you've got to look at education, and they are things which are basically being ignored at the moment by this government. So this is very, very damaging for Theresa May and her government. And so bandwidth is one of these odd phrases, but what it really means is you can only concentrate properly on one thing at a time, even if you are the government. Yeah, and this government
Nigel,
is caught...
So Nigel Farage, it's all your fault.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, most things are, of course. It's very interesting. I mean, every government talks about social mobility. None of them have achieved anything for decades and decades as the gap's got bigger. What is interesting is that Theresa May was one of the very few people in Westminster who genuinely believed that giving grammar school provision to many more people would start to close some of those gaps. In fact, it's one of the very few things that she actually believed in. And what's interesting is...
close the gap.
Oh, no, they certainly do.
They do not.
For bright kids from poor backgrounds...
But if you don't get into a grammar school...
It may not solve it for everybody, but it begins to close the gaps. And what I'm surprised by, what I'm very surprised by, is she's given up on that. She's completely dropped the grammar school part of her programme.
Where have we seen the promotion of social mobility or tackling poverty anywhere from Labour to Conservative? One of my biggest frustrations is, yes, there's this worry of the Brexit black hole, that all of our conversations will be involved in Brexit. But most of the solutions to tackling social mobility lie with Westminster. It has nothing to do with the European Union. We could liberalise housing tomorrow, build more homes, bring costs of rent and housing down. The UK has some of the highest costs of childcare in the OECD. We could tackle those regulations, bring that cost down, get more women back into work. None of this is tackled or discussed on either side. And I think
you have an agenda. Give Theresa May a call when you finish here after breakfast.
I just want to say one thing on that. I think the Labour government, Sure Start was a very, very important measure, which, you know, early intervention in terms of social mobility.
The numbers show that Sure Start did work.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, Sure Start is being cut by this government.
Nigel, can we were talking about Brexit. Let's talk about Brexit.
Why not? Yeah,
a really big Sunday Times
double-page spread here and cartoon and all the rest of it. Eurosceptics demand no more bowing to the EU. It's quite interesting that the government was elected as a pro-Brexit government, yet they find themselves increasingly moving away from mainstream Eurosceptic opinion in this country. For example, agreeing to pay up to 50 billion sterling as a separation migration bill from the European Union. I mean, that is something supported by only about 10% of the entire population.
Can I ask you about what you think about that? Because a lot of people would say it's a lot of money, even over many, many years. But if we get a really good trade deal as a result of that, it might economically, in the end, be worth it.
I don't think a tariff-free access deal to the European single market is worth 50 billion sterling. Absolutely not. It's way too much money. The problem with all of this is that the EU are being very unreasonable. At every step of this, they appear like bully boys. And to see Donald Tusk in Dublin the other day saying to the Irish, you can veto everything. There's a feeling that we're not dealing with reasonable people. There's also a feeling that we're probably, under Theresa May, at the end of March 2019, going to leave the European Union in name, but still be stuck part of the single market, and goodness knows
can I just
what gets agreed on Ireland.
Because one of the things that you've been very eloquent about is lavish overspending of EU funds. And I noticed that one Nigel Farage is going to get a £76,000
this is very, very important.
pension.
This is very important. There are 22,000 people who either receive or who are in line for EU pensions.
And you're one of them.
But of course, it just happens to be me they're talking about. No mention of Kinnock or Mandelson or anybody. All I can say is, given the arbitrary way the European Union behaves in terms of money, I'd be very surprised if I get any of it.
Well, can I ask you...
Very surprised if I get any of it.
Can I ask you a different question? Can I ask you a different question? This is your moment on live television to say that I will stick by my principles. I, Nigel Farage, would not accept this pension.
Oh, I'm not going to get it anyway, so it won't. I don't think this will even occur.
But if it did, you wouldn't take it?
Oh, I would. Of course, I would take it. I've said that right from day one. Well, of course.
Okay.
Why should my family and others suffer even more?
This is the sort of hypocrisy that we see.
No. I said it from day one. It is not hypocrisy. I've just voted to get rid of my job. I was the turkey that voted for Christmas. How's that hypocrisy? If it was hypocrisy, I'd have said we should stay in the EU.
You still hoovered up your expenses and your salary from the EU, which you rail against.
Well, at the moment, they've demanded an arbitrary 40,000 from me by Christmas. They're fining me. So, as I say, just look at the way they've treated me.
But I just want to say one last thing on the Brexit stuff. I mean, all of this just proves that when we voted to leave the EU, and I understand people had good reasons for doing it, it's like a leap of faith in the dark with a blindfold on. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And it now sings the phrase, take back control, was take back control and give it to the Irish. You know, we are in such a mess on Brexit.
That's why
we're going to talk about...
We have to stand up. We have to stand up and have proper leadership. Brexit's failing. Brexit's failing because of the government, not because we voted to leave.
Absolute waste of time.
Enough of that. We're going to move on to the other side of the Atlantic now, Kate. You've got, is it the New York Times there on the tablet?
It is the New York Times here, which is talking about Michael Flynn, the National Security Advisor, who earlier this year was fired because it turned out that he had more communications with the Russians than he had let the Vice President to believe. Flynn is now cooperating with the FBI and Agent Mueller, who is running the special investigation into Russia. And the New York Times...
He's cut some kind of deal, hasn't he?
Well, most likely. It looks like his cooperation might get him off on some of his other areas in which he might be more guilty. What the New York Times is highlighting is that Flynn might have had more communications with the Trump transition team than Donald Trump himself wanted to let on. It's an important story. Russia is going to continue to be an important story, but this is still not the smoking gun that I think most of Trump's opposition wants to find. And it concerns me that every story like this is used to prove that there was collusion. We still have no evidence that there was collusion. Who knows what will happen? We might find it.
So stay calm on this story. Follow the details. Stay calm.
And if you are actually frustrated with Donald Trump, going after him on Russia, I think, is the wrong angle. Go after his policy proposals. Look for other candidates that might be able to challenge him on the left and the right.
Well, let's do that then, because he's coming to this country, we read this morning, in February.
Yeah, I mean, apparently he's going to be here in February. There is, down in Battersea on the South Bank, a huge new American embassy that's being built. It's nearing completion. So the story is that he comes to London in February to open that and perhaps go to 10 Downing Street. Not a full state visit, but a working visit. And
can I ask you something about this? Because we've had these, I would say, actually disgraceful tweets from him this week, retweeting Britain First, which is a fascist, racist organisation. He retweeted Free Britain.
OK, let's just get this right, shall we? There are 43.6 million people that follow Donald Trump. Donald Trump follows 45 people. One of those is Ann Coulter, right-wing American commentator. Yeah. She retweeted these videos. He picked it up from her and retweeted it.
And he wouldn't have
an earthly clue who Britain First
But
were.
that doesn't
now,
matter.
Look,
He's
were they in good
him
taste?
Stupid.
Well, he's not that stupid. He's president of the USA,
Well, if he doesn't
and he's
know what
dominating.
he's retweeting,
Of course he
if
doesn't.
he-
Of course he doesn't
Well,
research
that means
everything.
he is stupid.
All right,
No, no, no,
I'm
no.
sorry.
You're dealing
Okay.
with. You're dealing
Clearly
with
we're dealing
asking
with
a
an
very,
idiot.
very different president here.
I'm asking
Now,
a slightly different question, if I may. Are they not? Was that not a disgraceful thing to do? Those tweets, were they not themselves disgraceful? They're stirring up hatred between people in this country. They're fake news. They should not have been retweeted by the President of the United States.
Was the story about ISIS throwing people off buildings fake news? No, it wasn't. It was true.
It
true.
happened in
Videos are
Egypt.
designed to
Do I
target Muslim
think?
communities.
Do I think, Andrew, those tweets were in good taste? Not particularly. No, I don't. But the point is,
You're going to
that
defend him.
the
You're
level,
always going to
the level
defend
of
him.
outrage from the liberal elite in this country is out of all
Right,
proportion
can I just say,
with what.
I just want
no,
to,
no, you can't
no,
actually.
I can actually.
With what
I
happened
can.
here.
I can.
And
I
every
just want
single
to
time,
make
every
one
single.
point.
No, I haven't finished yet. I haven't
Well,
finished
you're
yet.
not
One
I
after
haven't
another.
finished yet.
How's
And
it
the
finished?
idea, that should lead to half the Labour Party saying he shouldn't be allowed to come to our country, frankly, is ridiculous. And I think is viewed by the public as being ridiculous.
Aisha,
Donald
your
Trump
turn.
is a racist, he's misogynistic, and he's Islamophobic. He peddles in stirring up hate and division. Now, that is something that you might agree with, but that is not what British values are in this country. And just remember...
You're out of touch.
Just
You're out of
remember,
touch.
as Jo Cox lay there dying,
You're out of
the
touch.
scumbag who executed her shouted out the words,
I know.
Britain first.
I
So
know.
the idea
So you
that
think
you defend
do you
Donald Trump as,
actually think
oh,
the
it's a bit
president
of a
knows who
joke.
Britain First are?
If he
Aisha.
doesn't know
He does
who
by
Britain
now, I would have
First
thought.
is, he is
Kate.
not fit to hold that
I
office.
agree with Aisha completely in sentiment. I'm ashamed that the president goes about living his life in this manner, and we've seen it for a long time. He was attacking Mexicans as rapists and murderers before he was even elected. So this is nothing new, and it's deeply frustrating. We have to live in reality, and politicians can't sever ties with Donald Trump. I think a working visit is in order. I also don't think that people should be banned from coming to the UK because of unsavory views that they hold, as unsavory as they may be. But I think we, the public, have every right to protest this.
I mean, I slightly
dissent,
disagree.
and that is the
Farage,
right thing to do.
You said that Aisha was out of touch. When you see what happened in Charlottesville, for instance, and all those people making fascist salutes, and you hear some of the things being said from the Trump administration and that Steve Bannon thing, do you not think perhaps you are getting too close to a dark kind of politics?
Do you know something? I think I believe I've done more than anybody in this country to stop the rise of the far right in Britain. I did it by taking away those people who were going out and voting BNP and holding their nose. So when it comes to dealing with the far right, I've got a very good track record. Of course, I would condemn.
Okay.
Of course, I would condemn the extremists in Charlottesville, but the extremists on both sides. And it's very important that we don't get stuck.
Nigel,
look,
you've done more
there
to
is much,
stir up.
There are
You've
people
done
out
more
there.
to stir
Enough
up
of
There are
division.
people out there
It's
on the
just-
left in this
no, it's
country who
ridiculous.
use violence
Right.
to pursue their means. There's bad on both sides. It's important to recognise that.
Okay.
Very important.
I don't think we're going to get a calm consensus on this, I suspect. We're therefore going to go to a completely different story, which is in the Express, another really, really important story for British people today, which is new money for kids in schools who are vulnerable pupils with special needs.
Yes.
This is something that is a genuine crisis in this country.
It is, and hopefully you can find a little more consensus on this. So Prince William and Prince Harry, it looks like, have managed to sway the government to put £300 million more towards children who are suffering heavily from mental illness. Obviously a fantastic cause. It's an uplifting story, absolutely. I'm a little bit upset that, one has to go to the royals in order to make their case as to why we need better access to healthcare in the United Kingdom. I think there needs to be a sweeping look at healthcare reform, but obviously wonderful for the children who will benefit.
Well, this is one of those stories where we're going to be talking later on to Justine Greening, so we'll get even more facts as they come. Thank you all very